Aachen and Palermo, two cities bound by history and vision, united by the extraordinary figure of Frederick II. Crowned 5 times across this vast empire, including King of Sicily in Palermo in 1198 and King of Germany in Aachen in 1215, Frederick bridged the heart of Europe and the Mediterranean world. His court in Palermo became a hub of multicultural scholarship, where knowledge was not merely preserved, but actively translated, debated, and applied. Arabs, Byzantines, Jews, and Latins came together in a shared pursuit of learning, law, and science. Frederick's vision of governance was centuries ahead of its time. From public health and environmental management to regulated food systems and an impartial judiciary, he created legal frameworks that were rare for his era. In the Liber Augustalis, he codified provisions for forest and wildlife management, medical licensing, water system oversight, and public health regulation, establishing early forms of environmental governance and civic sustainability. Though 8 centuries have passed, his vision still speaks to us today. The same principles of systems thinking, interdisciplinary governance, and sustainable innovation remain at the heart of our work. And today, in LCM 2025, Aachen and Palermo meet once again, this time in collaboration, to carry forward that shared legacy into a sustainable future.
Good afternoon. I'm extremely honored to have you here. It's really a pleasure to have you here for the first LCM in Italy and first time in Palermo. As you have seen, Aachen and Palermo have a lot of things together. Friedrich the II, it was very important for Palermo, considered one of the best and most prosperous time in Palermo, and not only. Friedrich, as you ever heard, was definitely a front runner. We'll see. Sorry. The slide? Yes, I need the slide. Okay, coming in a minute. Anyway, Friedrich was, as you heard, was definitely front runner, and under his kingdom posed the basis of environmental protection, established the first constitution to define rights and duty for kings and citizens, as well as the first public and non-religious university in the world. Moreover, he managed to conquer Jerusalem and guarantee its access to the Catholic pilgrim without a military action. And this is, it's very important today, considering the context where we are. He managed to sign a Treaty of Jaffa. The Treaty of Jaffa, signed in February 1229 between Holy Roman Empire Friedrich II and Sultan Al-Kamil of Egypt, and ended the Sixth Crusade by returning Jerusalem to Christian rule under a 10-year truce, in this largely bloodless diplomatic agreement. Okay, so that we see that we are doing sustainability, and we are actually, this doesn't work. It's not my day, okay? So this is about Friedrich II, so we can learn, and we should learn, and I'm very happy to say that we are, even if the political context, we are 1,000 people. So we have reached the highest number for LCM 2025 with 127 participants, and we have more than 40% of industry. Thank you all. The reason why I put Palermo, because I believe that Palermo can put together the global north, global to local, but also the north with the global south, and we manage. We have actually all 6 continents, only Antarctica is not there, and so we support also to come from the global south. Okay, next. Okay, this doesn't work. Before worked perfectly, now no. Wonderful. So, but because I force you to fly, and I know that's not sustainable. We are accounting for the carbon footprint, so the CO2 equivalent, and we are compensating by supporting different projects to forestation and all that makes sense to compensate the CO2 equivalent. Next. Okay. You have a bags, also the bags, all of the gadget has a meanings, starting from trashy bags, all plastic come from ocean in Ghana. And then we have a bottle of water. Please don't forget tomorrow because we have running water so you can take directly. And the key holders are from a small company here that is everything in leather is recycled. Next, you see, it's a wonderful, this is one of the second biggest theater in Europe. And one important thing is that the air conditioning, I know you are suffering now a bit, sorry, but the air conditioning actually is a natural one because you can see that it can be open. And I learned today, actually, that this is like a piano because it has a specific, all this part is 11, so it's like really like a piano. Basile was the architect that built this. The next. We have received 987 contributions. We managed to sort out, and we get 6 sessions in parallel every day from tomorrow on. We have a 55 sessions in total, and more than different plenary. You will see, you will learn a bit more later on. Next. I try to make it a bit faster. I want to really thank you, Rose Manca. Rose, where are you? Rose, come over. And all the scientific committee that support us in selecting and all the contribution. Next, and of course I cannot avoid to thank the other 2 important pillars of this organization. One is Davide Bonafini, the co-chair, and also head of eco-design from Hitachi Rail, and Antonio Cuvais, that I don't see, please at least stand up, that is the CEO Circular. I mean, he's the man on the city, so without him, we cannot do it. Next, thanks. Thanks to all the core team, but you will learn all of them much more. And next, I want to thank you, the platinum sponsor, Makerside and Press Sustainability. You will know them later on. I mean, Fabian Hassel will be a keynote speaker today with us, and tomorrow we will have a plenary from Press Sustainability. And next, I thank you also our gold sponsor, EcoInvent and Sphera. They also will have some sessions. And again, next, please, all the sponsors in general that support us in this trip. Next, I also have the opportunity to give a PhD presentation award and also a best poster author. So be aware that we will analyze you and evaluate you better. And then one of the last, not last yet, sorry. I am happy to say that we managed to have a book from a small amount of your contribution that we're happy to deliver a long paper. There's a book, open access, you can access, will be published in short time. Thanks, Springer support us. The next, we have the proceeding, the book that will be also available online. These are also, for the first time, we will have ISBN, very important for us as scientists. Okay, so I think with this I conclude, and I'm very happy to start with first of all, I want to really thank, because we have to say, the padrone di casa, come do you say, the host, host of this event and in the entire event, Professor Roberto Galagalla, that is the mayor of Palermo. He gave us the support from the beginning on. From 2023, we meet the first time and he support us. Professor Galagalla is graduated from School of Medicine and Surgery in 1979 and specialized in diagnostic, radiology, oncology, radiotherapy since 1983. He's a full professor and the board of member of National Research Council, director of the Department of Radiological Science and the University Hospital of Palermo, several other points, and of course, the most important one, our mayor.
It's enough.
Our mayor. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed for your presence in Palermo. Welcome in our city. But thank you especially to Marzia Traverso for choosing Palermo as site of this important international conference. The first of them in Italy, and it's for us very important that the first choice was for Palermo. The city where Marzia was graduated. Even now, she is working abroad in Germany, but we are friends of Germany, so it's a pleasure for us, and especially for Germany. But sometimes they come back, and she is coming back. And this is a like situation for us, because your conference is very, very impressive for actuality, because sustainability is one of the pillars of the development in modern time. We need it because it's a point of careful evaluation of each situation in policy, in industry, in ecological and behavior system, in digital fields. Palermo now hosts a lot of national and international companies involved in digital research and in digital production. But also it's now one of the capitals of digital nomadism. And it's very important for the idea that we are going to build for our town. An historical town. You have observed the history of Frederick II, but we hosted during many centuries a lot of populations. And so here there is a special feeling that is sown of international, multilateral, and several hybridation that we had in our land. So Sicilian people are Italian people, but they are a special kind of Italian people, because I think that Palermo has a special mission, and its mission is to build, to realize a network between Europe, where we are geographically and politically included, with North Africa and Near and Middle Asia. So your presence is really well inserted in this vision. The vision of a town where we hope to build an hybridation, a modern hybridation between tradition and innovation. We have a lot of work to do, but when we are interested by international events or where people coming from a lot of countries in the world come in Palermo, we become more rich for new presence, but for the contribution that they can apport to our town. So, thank you very much indeed for this choice. I hope that you can enjoy Palermo, and I'm sure that yours will be a good job for all the people. Thank you very much indeed.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for being here, and I want to thank your efforts also in traveling and coming right to Palermo. This for me is very important because receiving somebody at home is always the honor of the person receiving the guest. And I am from Cameroon, but I have an Italian background because I came to Italy some more than 20 years ago. And we also have the culture of making guests welcome. And if a guest has to travel for so long to visit us, it is always our pleasure. And so that's why I want to thank you all for being here with us. And with this, I would like to also introduce our next speaker. And we have the Vice Director of Engineering, Department of Palermo University, Professor Marco Beccali. He has collaborated on and coordinated numerous studies on the rational use of energy, environmental and energy-related projects, and municipal and regional plans, energy plans. He did this in Rome, in Palermo, in Lombardy, in Sicily. He is also responsible for the renewable energy sector in drafting the regional energy plan proposal coordinated by the DREAM department. That's in the University of Palermo on behalf of the Sicilian region. He is a member of the International Energy Agency, and he is also an author of 4 books and about 220 scientific publications in the national and international arena and conference proceedings. According to the Scopus database, his work has received 2,500 citations, and he has an H index of 27. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I have to read from my recycled paper, okay? Okay, good afternoon, everyone. And let me start by saying what an honor it is to speak at the opening session of this global conference of life cycle management. I'm Marco Beccali, professor at the University of Palermo and vice director of the Department of Engineering of this university. And I'm here both as a researcher and as a representative of my academic community. I'm also truly pleased to welcome you to our city, Palermo. Let me briefly introduce the department I represent. The Department of Engineering at the University of Palermo is one of the largest in Italy. With 285 academic staff, 160 postdoc, 100 PhD candidates, and more than 6,500 enrolled students. We offer a broad educational portfolio, including 22 bachelor's degrees, 16 master's programs, and 5 PhD courses. And our research spans from a wide spectrum of fields, from energy and sustainability to robotics, AI, circular economy, advanced materials and transportation, and so on. Our labs are integrated into national and international research network, and we promote a strongly interdisciplinary approach, from life science to quantum technologies, from building physics to additive manufacturing. Our research work on real-world challenges using advanced methods to quantify impacts and support informed decisions. Several research teams at the Department of Engineering are actively involved in life cycle assessment of energy system, transportation, materials, and product design. I would also like to mention Marzia Traverso, our conference chair, and she has worked closely with our department, producing important contribution in LCA applied to green roofs, solar technologies, sustainable buildings, and always combining methodological rigor with practical relevance. We are also a department located in southern Italy, a region that has historically faced structural changes, but that today is finding new energy by embracing innovation and new model of works, as the measure also said. We are trying to make the most of our natural connection with other Mediterranean countries, turning geographically proximity and cultural affinity into research partnership, educational exchange, and shared development strategies. I began my career far from here, at Politecnico di Milano, very far from here, where I completed a PhD in energy planning and worked as a researcher for 10 years. But even then, I was already exploring the same fundamental question. How can we make decisions in energy and technology that are grounded in evidence, yet sensitive to complexity? That question has guided me ever since. For the past 25 years, I have worked in the field of renewable energy and energy efficiency. My research has always aimed to assess the benefits of the solutions we study in the broadest possible way, going behind performance and asking how these solutions affect the environment, the economy, and the society. The roots of this approach go back to my doctoral research. In the early 90s, I developed a multi-criteria framework to support territorial energy and environmental planning. Even then, I was combining both quantitative and qualitative criteria in the decision support system. Some were clearly measurable. Others required expert, let's say, a subjective judgment. But qualitative does not mean arbitrary. Evaluation can be made more robust if we define criteria transparently, assign multiple reviewers, and consult stakeholders. In my view, objectivity and measurability are not optional in research. They are foundational. As someone more important than me once said, what cannot be measured should become the object of the research so that we can learn how to measure it. When we, as a researcher, and also as citizens, talk about sustainability, we must be careful not to fall into slogans. If we say something is sustainable, we must be able to demonstrate it with evidence. And if that evidence doesn't exist, then it is our responsibility to build a metric, for instance. That's why I've long been interested in life cycle assessment, not only as a methodology, but as a mindset. Over the years, I've published several studies on LCA, especially for energy system, to complement and substantiate my research on innovative energy technologies. Let me give you a quick example. Suppose I want to show that a solar heating and cooling system is more sustainable than a conventional plant using a natural gas boiler or an electric-driven air conditioning machine. The answer may be may seem obvious. Yes, of course. But let's take a closer look. First, I must contextualize the system. The climate, the operation profile, the energy tariffs, for instance, the emissions factors. Then I analyze energy consumption in the operational phase. The solar system typically has very low consumption, except for the auxiliaries. The conventional one, much higher. Using standard conversion factor, I can compute primary energy demand or CO2 emissions, and that's easy, this is the easiest part. But a solar thermal panel is made of copper, is made of steel, is made of aluminum, polymers. It contains fluids, adhesive, electronics, and so on. And if we talk about photovoltaic panels, we have silicon, glass, silver, encapsulants, mounting structures, and when coupled with batteries, we must also account for lithium, cobalt, nickel, or lead. So we can build a full life cycle inventory, including manufacturing, transportation, installation, disposal, and compare it with the conventional system. If I have a good data set, and then I'm transparent about the assumption and processing of this data, over the construction phase, we can say that a solar thermal assisted plant with an absorption chiller, for instance, has a global energy requirement that is from 8 to 10 times the one of a conventional plant. A PV assisted plant, that is another typology of solar heating and cooling, can range from 5 times, if we connect directly to the grid, to 40 times if we have a standalone system with batteries. For sure, it depends on the dimension of the battery, but it depends on the design of the system. So it's a very wide, very large interval. So I can go further. I can shape a reliable comparison observing the operation phase, for sure. In most scenarios, the solar system performs better and allows to have energy payback times around 4 to 6 years. That's good, because the lifespan is 20, 25 years, so it's good. But in other cases, for example, in countries where electricity is already green, or plants requiring relevant electricity storage, so we have large batteries, the overall performance is negative, could be negative, having a payback time that's higher than expected lifespan. So the final outcome is not obvious. This is only an example. You know, many people here knows the importance of this kind of analysis. Depending on the specific condition, a solar system can actually have a higher impact than other systems that relies, at least in part, on fossil energy. But most of these factors related to this entire life cycle are measurable, and we can assess the overall impact with reasonable accuracy. But is that the whole story? I think not. For example, how and by whom these systems we are comparing are manufactured, assembled, and installed? Is the worker who assembles your solar collector being paid properly, or is he working 12 hours a day on a precarious contract? Does the plumber arrive at the site by tram, by bike, or in a smoky diesel van? These are hidden variables. We rarely include them in our models, but they are part of the real story, and maybe they matter more than we think. For many years, aspects like this were neglected, not because we didn't care, but because they were considered too difficult to quantify. That's now changing. Social and procedural dimensions of sustainability are gaining ground. And I believe that if we want a truly comprehensive sustainability metric, we must include this dimension too, even if it means building new indicators and agreeing on new shared methodologies. To me, this is not just a scientific challenge, it is an exercise in intellectual honesty. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that we should trust only numbers. We are human beings. We have ethics, we have judgment, we have a critical thinking. And we must teach the next generation not to outsource that thinking, not to institutions and not to algorithms. Critical reasoning cannot be delegated. Let me also take a moment to reflect, me too, on the place that is hosting us today, the Teatro Massimo. More than just a cultural landmark, this extraordinary building is a remarkable early example of sustainable architecture. Designed in the late 19th century by Giovanni Battista Filippo Basile and completed by his son Ernesto, it incorporated cutting-edge building science of the time. The materials were mostly local, compact and durable limestone from Bigliemi, tough and sandstone from Aspra, Solanto, Bocca di Falco e Dannisini in the Palermo area, and mostly Sicilian marble for decorative finishes. Okay, there is some wood from Corso, maybe the steel is not from Palermo, but most of the material of the building mass is coming from Sicily. But behind materials choice, what truly stands out is the climate-conscious design. The theater was equipped with a pioneering passive ventilation and heating system. Fresh air was drawn from the opening near the base of the building and naturally warmed by radiators under the floor, hidden under the stalls and diffused through a complex ducting system that encouraged natural convection. Right beneath your feet, air was gently warmed and circulated. And circulated without any mechanical fan. The warm air rose toward the ceiling, which included openings that could be mechanically adjusted to release heat and exhaust air, and a passive cooling strategy well ahead of its time. Even the auditorium cupola could be opened to regulate the temperature and airflow, functioning like a giant thermal valve with 11 movable segments opening like the petals of the flower. And yet, for much of the 20th century, we moved in the opposite direction. We built with imported energy-intensive materials, often chosen for their cost, their appearance, or speed of construction rather than environmental performances. We adopted mechanical systems as substitutes for good envelope design, relying on fossil fuel-powered heating and cooling to compensate for poorly insulated buildings. We often ignored the local context, the climate, the tradition, and the resources in favor of generic, energy-hungry solutions. In doing so, we created a legacy of buildings that are not only inefficient, but also difficult to decarbonize. It is now our shared responsibility as engineers, architects, and citizens to shift this legacy. And one way we do that is through careful, evidence-based evaluations. That is where methods like life cycle assessment become not only useful, but essential. So, I am proud to be part of this community, a community that uses LCM not only as a scientific tool, but as a way to approach complexity and as a compass for responsible innovation. Thank you for your attention and wish you all a fruitful and inspiring conference.
Wow. To be honest, I did several speeches during my career into different conferences, universities and associations. But I have never had such a large audience in such a beautiful place with such significant and historical and emotional value, mainly for me. I could say that my career started here since more than 30 years ago when I did my one of the first training lessons for safety to the workers of the Teatro Massimo Foundation. For me, this is the most beautiful theater in the world, for sure the largest in Europe, and I'm really so proud to be here to represent my company. Furthermore, it is an honor for me to co-chair with Marzia this event, mainly in my hometown. And I would like to thank Marzia and all LCM Planning Committee members to involve me and welcome me into this committee. Marzia did an impressive work, and this wonderful event is the goal of her and her team job. I would also want to thank all the authorities present today, from Major Professor Lagalla to Professor Giorgio Giovannini, whom I strongly encourage to involve along with Marzia, and all the other professionals that will contribute to the success of this event. But now it's better to start with the technical support, with the technical presentation, and I would like to introduce you Professor Enrico Giovannini, full professor of Economic Statistics and Sustainable Development of University of Roma Tor Vergata. He is the co-founder of the Italian Alliance for Sustainable Development, contributing to global discussion on sustainable development. Professor Giovannini is a prominent Italian economist and statistician with a career spanning academia, public service, and international organization. He graduated in economics from La Sapienza University in Rome in 1981 and has several significant positions, including Minister of Sustainable Infrastructure and Mobility in the Draghi government from February to October 2022, and Minister of Labor and Social Policies in Letta government. He served as president of the Italian National Institute of Statistics and as director of statistics and chief statistician, at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development from 2001 to 2009. Today, he will refer to how measuring well-being beyond GDP can radically change public and private decision-making processes. So please welcome Professor Enrico Giovannini. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you, Marzia, for this invitation. It's an honor to be here and address a so important and dynamic association and group of thinkers. But I'm also very thrilled because in this theater, in 2004, as Chief Statistician of the OECD, I organized the first OECD World Forum on measuring progress and well-being, which launched the whole Beyond GDP initiative that you may have heard about. Today, I was asked to present to you some results about the importance of measuring well-being beyond GDP, and how this can radically change public and private decision-making processes. While I was minister in the Draghi's government, I introduced for the planning and implementation of new infrastructures, such as railroads and so on, the LCA calculation in order to assess the impact of those infrastructures on sustainability dimensions, not only the environmental ones, but also the economic and the social ones, which are equally important. We know that we are living in an unsustainable world, and what we heard before clearly shows how the amount of wrong decisions made over the last 100 years and so made our world unsustainable. When I was a young student in 1976 at the University of Rome, I read a book about the messy world that we could have around 2020. It was based on the Clever Rome scenarios, and I decided to become an economist, try to fix the problem. Given the gravity of the problems, I don't think that I gave a fundamental contribution. But anyway, I'm still in fighting to try to take the world onto a sustainable path. As Albert Einstein said once, we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we use to create them. Therefore, we have to start, but you are experts in these, so I can go very quickly. We have to start thinking about the complex systems. And unfortunately, we economists in particular didn't provide a great help to think in system perspective. We normally say other things equal, and then we present our ideas, our models, our theories. We have learned more recently worldwide that we live in a complex system. And the complex systems are systems where behavior is intrinsically difficult to model. Therefore, we also learn that we live in a world which is mainly driven by nonlinear processes, while, again, we economists have built linear models. And in doing that, we bias the results of our analysis. Let me take another element that you know very well of complex systems, which is the resilience of systems. Resilience is a very well-known concept, although also in this case, biased interpretation of this concept didn't help economists to get right answers to the problems that we're having. We built over the years, the centuries, a planet which is at low resilience and high risk. And when I say planet, I'm not just talking about the natural planet, but I'm also talking about human being societies. If we want to move back from a low resilience, high risk situation to a high resilience, low risk situation, we have to take a very long and painful series of decisions that can reverse what we have made wrongly over the centuries. I've been working since 2015 as consultant to the Joint Research Center of the European Commission, where we developed an overall approach, a policy approach to resilience, actually transformative resilience, as we call them. You have this very simple chart. On the x-axis, you have the time of exposure to risks and to shocks, actually, and then on the y-axis, you have disturbance intensity. The combination of these two elements may be addressed through absorption, through adaptation, or through a transformation. Let me just check your memory. What happened in 2008? Well, Lehman Brothers, the financial crisis, you remember very well. And Europe was able to absorb it because it was a classical, strong but short shock. What happened in 2010? The so-called debt crisis in Europe, and we had to change our systems to adapt to these new conditions. What happened in 2015? Nobody gets this. Is the asylum crisis. A flow of migrants equal to 0.5% of the EU population risked to make the European Union collapsing about the non-linear systems. 2020, well, this is easy, pandemic. 2022, of course, war in Ukraine. Is just bad luck, or there is something more? Is our system that is breaking? And therefore, what's next? And we know what's going on now. At the Joint Research Center of the European Union, we developed systems to address these issues, also indicators of vulnerability and resilience. And now you know why the Next Generation EU plan in Europe pushed to have the so-called Recovery and Resilience Facility. So our work was taken by the political leaders to try to design national plans for recovery and resilience exactly in this direction. Especially, why do we want to go back to the situation that we had before a shock if we were not on a sustainable development pathway? This is the normal way for economists to look at resilience. But on the contrary, we talked about transformative resilience, using the phase to bounce instead of back forward, transforming the system and reaching a different level of pathway of sustainable development. I guess that everybody knows the 2030 Agenda with its 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And this is the chart that I normally use for describing the world where we are living. We have the planetary boundaries around, I know it's a rectangle, it's not a circle, but anyway. What we do is to bring together natural capital, human capital, social capital, produce capital, combine them in a production process. We produce GDP, and then we consume part of the GDP. We reinvest part of the GDP to rebuild or increase the capital stock. In doing that, we forgot completely part of the system. Ecological economists have identified clearly the impact of production processes and consumption processes on physical waste that indeed have a direct impact on well-being, but also on ecological services. But then Pope Francis wrote the Laudato Si encyclica, saying that the principles and the systems that create physical wastes are the same that create human wastes. Therefore, I had to add to the ecological economist chart another box, which is the social system services. Peace, trust, common vision of the future that have a direct impact on well-being. So if we put the 17 Sustainable Development Goals on this chart, we see that the goals are not just a list of agreed targets, and I was involved by the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon as far as the last two targets of the last goal on statistics in 2014, but is a plan to change the world and to take it onto a sustainable pathway. Now, can we represent all these through a single number GDP? Of course not. But is it a good approximation or not? In 1944, the US government called the British and American economists to Washington in order to try to find the way to design GDP and impose GDP to the rest of the world through the Bretton Woods institutions. And they went for the British solution that was based on the amount of production and not the American solution proposed by Kuznets, that in economic textbooks is considered the father of GDP. He was never, even not invited to the second meeting because he was the loser, that was proposing an approach based on consumption and well-being. Why did the American government do that? Because they wanted to demonstrate that capitalism was able to produce more stuff than communism, period. That was the political aim. And after so many years, we are almost using the same approach, although the system of national accounts changed over the years many times. For example, in the Pact of the Future agreed by the UN Secretary General, finally, there was a decision to try to go beyond GDP. High-level group of experts, 14 experts from all over the world was formed. I'm one of the members, and we will be working to make recommendations to the UN General Assembly by the end of this year in order finally, I hope, to go beyond GDP. But how can we go beyond GDP? There are several ways, and also economists and statisticians are working on this. These are figures coming from UK National Statistical Office research, which move from disposable income, which is almost the income less taxes plus benefits for households, to the concept of net inclusive income, which also includes voluntary work, unpaid work for taking care of people, and so on and so forth. What is the conclusion? That this completely missed part of people's well-being, and we are talking here mainly about economic well-being, is equal more or less to what is counted through the national accounts. So we are not neglecting just 5% or whatever, we are missing 45% of what makes the well-being of people real. In Europe, we have the treaty which says that the Union's aim is to promote peace, its values, and the well-being of people, of its peoples. It doesn't talk about GDP. By the way, Article 3, after this first comma, quotes almost all the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, demonstrating that it was Europe that built the 2030 Agenda, which makes me very proud. We managed to have this project on measuring sustainable and inclusive well-being as part of the political strategies. And we did it. This is a research paper that we published in January. And as you can see, we start from nature, from the environment, without which we don't have any life. And then we focus on the peoples and society, current well-being and future well-being. And then we focus on the elements that connect the current well-being with the future well-being. And these are the boxes that you can see our framework has chosen. So you have both flows and stocks. And you can read these sort of framework, but also the dashboard, similar to what you do when you drive a car. For example, inclusiveness is about the balance of your tires. The amount of capital, not only economic, but also social, environmental, is about the amount of fuel or the battery that allows you or not to go where you want to go. So we have built these indicators. We started from more than 1,100 indicators that are all the indicators used by the European Commission. Through dialogue with the experts, we narrowed down to 150 and then to 50, and then we built composite indicators on this particular phenomena. And as you can see, the picture is quite scattered among EU countries. But what is important is that if you compare the current well-being and the GDP, you can see that Europe performed very well, much more than GDP, much more than what we normally say on GDP. But if we look at the sustainable and inclusive well-being, then the distance gets quite large. And of course, you can evaluate the different dimensions of the sustainable and inclusive well-being. For example, if you look at the gray line, that is about the quality of institutions. That, as you can see, goes down over the years. Then we are now developing the comparison with the US, where you have several differences, and I stop here, of course. I cannot go through all the dimensions, but you can read this data soon, as we will be releasing the database quite soon. And if you compare France, Germany, and Italy, again, you have quite different pictures, and those who come from these countries can recognize maybe some dynamics that they know very well. For example, for Italy, we have these different dynamics, and it's quite remarkable the societal resilience that was going down, but starting in 2020, it picked up. And we know what happened in Italy with the help of volunteers and many other organizations during the pandemic and what happened later on. Let me conclude with the work that we are the ASVIS, the Italian Alliance for Sustainable Development, that brings together more than 300 organizations, trade unions, business associations, research institute, non-profit organizations. Is a quite unique, according to UN, experience worldwide. We published several reports, and one of them, the spring report, is about the future. And we looked at different scenarios in cooperation with a very dangerous group of communists and environmentalists. So is Oxford Economics, you may know it, is a very well-known group of economists at world level. I don't have time to go into the whole story, but it's quite clear that if we take the energy transition as such, we risk to have a decline of GDP due to the fact that we have to impose carbon taxes and so on. But if we go towards transformation, net zero scenario, then the story changes completely, and innovation makes the difference. These are the data, for example, for Italy, and we also tested the classical approach by politicians, which is the so-called NIMTO syndrome. You may know the NIMBY one. NIMTO is not in my term of office. Not when I'm president of the Council of the Government, not when I'm CEO. I postpone just by 5 years what needs to be done. Great mistake, also in terms of economic results. Let me just conclude, I skip the others because I was long, that we have built also a model in order to identify at regional level how the planning, the National Plan for Recovery and Resilience, European funds, but also regional funds, can help in achieving the 17 goals. Describing the situation, this is Tuscany, by 2026, when the National Plan for Recovery and Resilience is implemented, 2030, when the European funds will be, have to be spent, and so on and so forth. What does it mean? That we have data, models, and maybe system thinking that would allow us to make a jump in the way in which policies are designed, decisions are taken. Of course, this is not mainstream, this is not agreed by everybody, but this is why researchers and activists and those who believe that the alternative to sustainability is only an unsustainable world, which is exactly where we are. We have to keep fighting, we have to keep investing in the development of data, techniques, and thinking, because we need, as Einstein said, a new way of solving all problems. And I stop here just quoting a Shakespeare sentence, don't destroy your present on the basis of a past that doesn't have a future. I know it's a little bit tricky, but it's very good. Thank you.
And now we have with us Elena Vines Fiestas. I'm particularly happy to introduce her because I work with her. So Elena Vines Fiestas is a commissioner at the Spanish Financial Market Authority and co-chair of the Task Force on Net Zero Policy and former chair of the EU Platform on Sustainable Finance. Additionally, she is a member of Climate Environment Advisory Council of the European Investment Bank and formerly of the UN Secretary-General High-Level Expert Group on Net Zero pledges. I had the opportunity to work directly with her we were both rapporteur as the first EU Platform on Sustainable Finance. And now she will give us a talk on global policy trends, rethinking taxonomy as tools for net zero transition. Elena, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Marcia, for your very kind words. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a real pleasure to be here today with all of you. And as we stand here together in this magnificent, beautiful, and historically unique theater, allow me to begin by recalling that in less than 3 months, we will be marking the 10th anniversary of the Paris Climate Accord. I don't think we can call or qualify the Paris Agreement as magnificent or beautiful, but clearly we can say that it was historically unprecedented and that it marked a turning point in the history of our economic model. Because what happened in Paris was basically that all the heads of state around the world, except for one, and I'm not thinking about the United States, agreed together to move away, to begin the move away from an economic system that was no longer sustainable. And what it did is that it set up the direction of travel, and it made it clear that we all together, we needed to move to a net zero, resilient, and much, much more sustainable economic model. And what that did is that it gave policymakers and market participants across the world the confidence that now they could begin their transition in earnest. So right after the Paris Agreement, we start seeing little by little, but with inevitable direction of travel, it's a wave of climate, corporate and financial regulation. And I'm sorry to tell you, but I am now going to brought you with me to the fascinating world of financial regulation, so apologies in advance. Now, what has happened, during those 10 years? Well, what we, and how I'm going to give you a sort of like a snapshot of the type of policies that I'm referring to and that have been developed is through my hat on the task force of net zero policy. As Marcia was saying, I was part of the UN High-Level Expert Group, Secretary General High-Level Expert Group on net zero pledges for non-state entities. We basically focus on the largest companies in the world and financial institutions. Those companies that might be domiciled in Italy, might be domiciled in South Africa or India, but basically they are international because they are so big, operate across the world, and have global supply chains. So in the task force that we launched 3 years ago as a sort of like a spin-off or a continuation of the UN Secretary General High-Level Expert Group, that task force that I founded and I co-chair, basically we had 3 objectives. The first one was to conduct research an analysis on policies, policies that they were designed for large companies and financial institutions to support them in their transition to net zero. The second thing, or the second aim, was to create a space for policymakers and regulators where they could come together and share experiences, the learnings, what's worked, what's not worked, and that leads me to the third objective, which is to work together towards greater convergence, towards, interoperability, making some of the tools and policy measures interoperable in different markets, given, particularly when we talk about financial markets, how international, and globalized they are. So, what last year, in November 24, in Baku, during the COP, because every year we need to present to Secretary General a progress report of what has happened during that year, what we did was we look at all the policies in the G20 countries that they were part of the corporate and financial regulation, or they were part of the real economy, but had a specific corporate or financial requirements for companies linked directly to financial regulation. And we examine, what was the state of affairs in the G20. And this is what I'm going to present to you in a minute. And the first thing that we realize is that actually there have been progress and there are policies all across G20 countries. Yes, Europe by and large and by far, leads, but it's not as many people think that it's just Brussels, a machine to, develop regulation. Actually, you can find regulation and policies in this area all across the G20, and not only in developed countries, but very much so in emerging countries. And it's very interesting because we're starting to see how in some countries, like in South Africa, Indonesia, or Brazil, they are, giving it a different spin to some of the regulations, including, for example, many of the concepts that we talk about here, but they're not fully integrated, such as just transition. So the number one type of policies that we identify were disclosures. Right? Disclosures, these are reporting requirements for companies and financial institutions. And what we have seen is that over the past few years, not only they have increased, but they have moved from just a set of indicators to start looking, forward. To start, tell me about your future targets, tell me about your investments to come, and that they increasingly are asking for criteria. That means that it's not only, tell me, what your transition plan, but I'm going to tell you how you need to disclose that. I'm going to tell you the criteria, and I'm going to tell you what you can account or cannot account. For example, that's the case in the EU when it comes to offsets that cannot be included in the report of interim targets when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions reductions. We can tell the history of disclosures started very much with the TCFD, the Task Force on Climate-Related Disclosures, Financial Disclosures, that was delegated to the Financial Stability Board by the G20 and were created, sort of the base that Europe took, then developed much farther the sustainability report. That's something that we work on the technical expert group, the predecessor of the platform on sustainable finance, and that was the base then to the International Sustainability Standard reports, ISSB, for those who know it, who today are being adopted or plan to be adopted in 35 jurisdictions, not counting the EU. The EU has its own, but it has aligned with the ISSB. I'm going to leave to the side all the stories of the current developments. So basically, the climate disclosures are going to be implemented in 36 jurisdictions, and they are fully interoperable. Besides entity, there we go. There we go. Besides the entity disclosures, there's a whole series of other type of regulation. Prudential regulation, really important. That's very much, focusing on banks and insurers. We find it in 11 of the G20 countries have specific requirements. Then we find all sort of different types of regulation around financial instruments, financial products, about green claims. But the two tools that have emerged as two sides of the same coin in terms of tools for green and transition finance are taxonomies on one hand and transition plans. And let me check how many people know about taxonomies, have heard, know what the concept is. Sustainable finance? Okay, so for those who do not, taxonomies, or I should say sustainable finance taxonomies, are what I like to think about them as a sort of like a dictionary, right? It's a dictionary that tells you which economic activities can be considered sustainable and under which circumstances. And for that, they use technical criteria. Now, we often forget that it was China, the first one to develop a green taxonomy that it uses exclusively for the green issuance in China. And it's been very successful in China, I must say. But the EU was second and developed, the probably most developed, taxonomy. It also, I look at Marcia, she knows it very well, including other, not only climate, but also other environmental objectives, and including, the making sure that not only you contribute to the achievement of one of the environmental objectives, but that do not harm the other environmental objectives. It's the only tool we have today in the finance world that actually deals with the interrelation between the different environmental objectives and the interrelations. Now, on that, by the time we did the study, we identified 50 taxonomies based in the EU taxonomies. As of today, we have identified 60 taxonomies have been developed or are in the making, across the world, making, 65% of the global GDP under a taxonomy. So the taxonomies operate as what I call bottom-up, right, at activity level. And then you have transition plans, basically are what they say, the plan of an entity, a company, on how they, intend to reach net zero, including, emissions targets. Transition plans, what we've seen is that there are 8 jurisdictions of the G20 that have some sort of requirements in relation to transition plan, but taking into account that ISSB has just, integrated the transition plans reporting from the TPT task force, a task force, we can easily say that those 36 jurisdictions will have requirements when it comes to transition plans. Now, as I said, we not only looked at pure financial regulation and corporate regulation, we also examined, some this, if you're interested, the report is called Net Zero Policy Matters and it's available in the net. So we looked at different types of policies in relation to all the issues that you see in the screen, but that had, as I said, specific requirements when it comes to companies, yeah? So, for example, South Africa, the Climate Change Act in South Africa, mandates the Ministry of the Environment to set emission targets for the different economic sectors, and then the minister will have to allocate carbon budgets to the higher emitters within those sectors. And we've seen similar developments in other parts of the world, such as Japan. Now, besides, you can see the extent to which, the policies have been developed. We identify that since 2020, policy measures and policies have tripled across G20 countries. And you would say by now, okay, that sounds really, really good. But, your data, you just said that you handed over the report last November at COP to the Secretary General. And in fact, the data, takes all policy developments until September 2024. What has happened? Because let's be honest, things have changed slightly since then. Well, this is before I go into the EU. I would like to start with the US. In fact, the US, when it came to at federal level, had few of those policies, but was on the way, to develop quite a few. That has, as you all know very well, that has stopped. They've been derogated. We can say, they're non-existent. However, and it's a big however, what we've seen is that at state level, what we are experiencing is a deepened, divide between those states we call on the western coast and part of the eastern coast, with California in the lead, the 5th largest economy in the world, with some really progressive, climate policies, and a very well-functioning carbon market, plus the requirements to companies, actually leading the way, and states, as we speak, like Washington State, Colorado, New York, and other states, they have in the pipeline regulations very similar to that of California. So we see that divide happening. And very interesting in the financial markets, we're starting to see an extrapolation of that division between asset owners and asset managers, particularly the largest pension funds in California, in New York, in the Eastern Coast, reiterating and confirming their, commitment to climate management risk, and asset managers and some of the most important banking groups, withdrawing from such commitments. And one of the first consequences of that is that we've seen European pension funds are starting to repatriate their funds that they have mandated US asset managers. Just last week, we heard about 30 billion that have been retired, taken out from one of the largest, if not the largest, asset manager in the world, and hand over to European asset managers for that. And this is important, and we'll pick up on that in a minute. So as for the rest of the world, again, Europe to our side, and knowing that this is, that this is very rough because we are doing the update as we speak. What we're seeing is that the world goes on. And when you take the helicopter, which I hope for the Europeans and Americans in this room, if you're able to take the helicopter and start moving, south and east, you start seeing that the policy, it continues to be developed. Really interesting cases in Canada, Australia, the UK, where there's been a recap. Japan is developing some of the most interesting policies that we're seeing in the area. And also, from China, South Africa, Brazil, in Latin America, we're seeing a plethora of policies, many of them, emulating, as I said, or getting inspiration from the EU, but making them theirs with their own, with their own spin, with their own objectives, and concerns being integrated, and their own ways of doing it. So where is the EU within that? Well, as you all have probably heard, there's been a pretty strong shift within the EU, discourse. The last Commission made the Green Deal its flagship policy and the strategy, and this Commission has a slightly different intake. But before sharing some of the figures with you, I want to share 3 personal reflections. The first one is that we've seen a false narrative in Europe being installed in the public debate that equates sustainability to lack of competitiveness, not based on any evidence whatsoever. In the contrary, we could very well argue that sustainability through decarbonization, through climate resilience, energy efficiency, natural resources efficiency, circular economy, in a continent that has very little access to critical materials and that is desperate for energy independence and sovereignty, sustainability speaks to competition and competitiveness, yeah? But almost more worrying than that is because this narrative is diverting us from the real root of the lack of competitiveness or the loss of competitiveness, which I would argue in financial markets, remember I'm speaking about financial regulation the whole time, I would argue that has the root in two main problems. The first one is the fragmentation in Europe. Is it really EU regulation the problem, or is the fact that we have EU regulation plus 27 national regulations, you know? Think about corporate law, think about solvency, think about stewardship, you know, fiscal policy. So I would argue that, yes, it's all really good to review policies to cut red tape, but that needs to be, yes, simplify maintaining the objectives, but what we really need is a convergence and having one framework, one policy framework. The second problem, you know, or origin is, I would say, is the lack of depth and integration of our markets, you know, with a very low ratio of deposit to investments. If we had the same ratio as in the US, you know, we would have 8 trillion, want to really highlight it, 8 trillion euros, you know, to spend, to invest, not only in the twin transition, the energy transition, ecological transition, and digital, but also on defense, on innovation, on et cetera, et cetera. So those should be our priorities, and that, you know, what is called, you know, in the Brussels jargon, the Savings and Investment Union, should go hand in hand with sustainability finance. Now, the third reflection, I'm going to quote Professor Marco Beccoli, is that whatever you do, it needs to, you know, that review needs to be grounded in evidence, yeah? And this is why, and I would like to finish, you know, the next few minutes, you know, to give you a snapshot of what the evidence is telling us, because when we started the second mandate of the platform, yeah, now 2.5 years ago, the Commission, and that was before, you know, we were talking about simplification, already gave us the mandate to say, look, it's been now 2 to 3 years of implementation of some of the policies, particularly the taxonomy, which is the cornerstone of the sustainable finance package. Some are being yet to be implemented, you know, but you know, we think that it's about the time to review and start looking at what has worked, what hasn't worked, and how we can make it more efficient, and start that dialogue with the industry about that review. And that's exactly what we did, yeah? And why we, and it is in the Commission's website, if anyone is interested, you know, you have not only the compendium of market practices with everything that we came out with, you know, and with deep surveys of 7 different types of stakeholders across Europe. But we also, you know, wrote a report on how to simplify the taxonomy. I'm glad to have seen that the Commission took quite a lot of our recommendations on board. Anyway, what we did find is that despite all the problems, actually the taxonomy works. And the main reason I want to share it with you is that, I'll give a parenthesis, you know, one explanation for those who are not familiar. When it comes to the taxonomy, there's no obligation on investing A or B, yeah? The only obligation is linked to transparency. So companies, you know, the largest companies in Europe need to report how much of their revenues are generated from one of the activities within the taxonomy, if they meet, you know, their revenues, if they meet the criteria. So that giving investors and bankers, financial institutions, a picture of where they are, the percentage of sustainability of their activities on one hand, and on the other hand, you know, moving forward, you know, how much they are investing, you know, the capital expenditures, that they are aligned with the taxonomy. So looking forward, so it's not only that, you know, they're going into an activity that is aligned, but, you know, the investments to become aligned with the taxonomy. And all the studies we've done, you know, have proven that that's the biggest success of the taxonomy within Europe, because it captures how the capital expenditure is moving forward, but more than that, it guides it, yeah? And that means that the new investments, new infrastructures, new plans are invested, are being developed fit for purpose. So on that, what we found out the first 2 years, so this is the reports that refer to 2022, 2023, we found that in terms of CapEx, we went from 220 billion to 310 billion. So in 2 years, 530 billion. But this only accounts for 2,000, companies, the largest, listed companies. They have already invested in those 2 years. In June, the last time that we checked the numbers, we were already at 800 billion. So 800 billion with a 34% only between the first 2 years of increase in CapEx. And here is, for me, what becomes the most interesting as a policymaker, as a regulator that I am, which is the taxonomy is not only that it guides companies, guides everyone to go towards the same objective, invest and have, that reference of what sustainable is and guide those investments, but it's an incredible, powerful, policy tool. Why? Because the taxonomy operates at the very detailed level of what an activity is. It doesn't say, this energy sector. It actually looks at, distribution of electricity, transmission of electricity, very specific activities. And now, for the very first time in Europe, we can monitor how much capital is going to which economic activities and via which type of financial instrument or means of being funded. And what that means also is that we can see over time which economic activities are being invested and the market is self-sufficient, and which technologies are actually underinvested. And here is where I go. So if we are moving towards an evidence-based world, we want to simplify things, irrespectively of how much some of the criteria might need to be reviewed, yeah? And in a world where there's such a great competition for public funding, isn't that the answer to so many of questions? What we need is proper sectoral pathways, correct? We need then to translate on technology pathways, where you integrate competition and you actually identify those technologies that you really want to move forward. And then you have, you see what is the private sector doing, and then you can place your incentives there where it is mostly needed. And the last thing I would say about the taxonomy is that on top of it, when we interview investors, they're all saying, this is what I really want. This is what I really like, because I know now the capex of the investments of a company gives me the credibility of the transition plans. We've seen far too many companies changing their targets overnight. Where they're putting their money, is actually where they're heading towards, and that's the most valuable indicator for us investors. So the other thing is that we have done studies, the sell-side analysts have done studies on the correlation between taxonomy performance and financial market performance, and there is a positive performance. So it is actually working. And now to conclude, and as we approach, as I said at the very, very beginning, we approach, the 10th anniversary of the Paris Agreement. In spite of, probably or precisely because of the current geopolitical context, could I just have, and reiterate two asks. The first one is that we really fight the narrative, the false narrative that is being installed in the public domain, and we count with you academics and with you companies, to really fight that battle. And secondly is that we don't need deregulation. What we need is good, efficient policies. We need to review policies through the lenses of evidence. We need more and good policies. We need to cooperate. We need multilateralism and collaboration, to create the right policy framework to support companies and financial institutions in their efforts to net zero. Without good policies, we're heading directly and straight to a disorderly transition with the catastrophic, consequences that we all know will have for our financial system, Think the financial crisis, that would be a joke compared with what is ahead of us for our societies and, of course, for our economy. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening.
And we have heard about company in the, let's say, the journey of sustainable development. And I think, just to share with you, I had to choose life cycle management or life cycle assessment or sustainability because I saw that it is what could help me to have a specific, context-specific view or solutions of problems. I am a chemical engineer, so I know for some it's strange that I'm doing sustainability, but sustainability and LCA is based on evidence, is based on getting information which represents the specific context. So you will not be surprised that our theme for LCM is global to local. And also I had the opportunity to start implementing and understanding sustainability in the industry. And that's why it's my pleasure to call the next speaker, who is coming from industry. And he is the head of eco-design and circular economy transition at Hitachi Rail. He is also our co-chair of the LCM 2025. Davide Bonafini has been spearheading efforts to align industrial design processes with eco-efficiency standards, driving the adoption of sustainable materials, modularity, and end-of-life strategies. He is spearheading also the company strategy initiatives in sustainable product design and environmental innovation. Please join me to welcome Davide Bonafini.
So, thank you very much. Today I would like to start speaking regarding some aspects, but in order to better focus, I would like to show who we are. Hitachi is a wider company that has a long history since just last year is 150 anniversary of the born of our founder that define specific, as you know, this is our mission, contributing to society through development of superior original technology and product. Just to have a short overview on the size of our company, we are covering around 320,000 people worldwide. We are the 10th largest tech company in the world, with around 182,000 global patents, and with an investment around $2.35 annual investment in R&D. The company is divided in three different main businesses that are the digital, the green energy and mobility, and the industries. All these three different businesses covers around 94% of total revenues. There are also other small sectors. I'm representing today Hitachi Rail, that is part of green energy and mobility area of business. We are 24,000 employees with 12 manufacturing sites. We are covering 50 countries, and we just to provide you, we just release 50 million tickets daily. We cover 26 kilometers of main line railways with our technology on signaling systems, and also 4,600 of urban railways covered by our technology. I would like to focus today on eco-anxiety. This is a specific pathology that many of our young generation is suffering today. And the reason why they suffer this specific eco-anxiety is related to the climate change and all consequences of this. Most of this is related mainly to the fact that many questions are raised, but these questions didn't or don't receive any answer. And if sometimes some answer is received, is completely not satisfactory. The problem is that today I cannot talk as doctor because I'm not a doctor, so I cannot say anything regarding the medical support that we can provide to this young generation. But for sure, I can show how Hitachi Rail, me and my team and my company, is working in providing practical and real answer on what we are doing in order to reply to these doubts, fears, and insecurities. We like to involve men and women of tomorrow, and we work in order to provide them the better reply. We talk to them, and in order to do this, I will provide, and when I would like to follow the concept of this conference from global to local. So I am providing you some numbers, some local numbers of what we do during our current activities. Here in Italy, we have around we involve around 1,000 students. These are the numbers related to a couple of years from 2022 and 2023 and 2023 and 2024 and 24 school years. In Pistoia, in Reggio Calabria, and in Naples, we involve these guys, and they come in our facilities. We show them our manufacturing area, our design engineering department. We show them how we work, how we design our train in order to improve our environmental performance. This is the same that we do also in Japan. Kasado and Tokyo are two facilities located in Japan, and we show our kids that comes in the students that come in our facilities how the Newton's laws support the electric trains, or we show our kids the operational control center. Something happened, sorry, okay. That's nice, okay. Also in USA, in our area in Honolulu, we have invited more than 1,600 students, and some engineers of the engineering department show them how to build up a curriculum vitae, or we participate to Girl Scout STEM Fest, working with the girls that are under 10 years. Last but not least, also in UK, in Newton Aycliffe facilities, we have had close to 2,000 students, in which our engineers show them the students of robotics and mechatronics school in order to understand how to improve their awareness. And also we welcome young people in order to support us in improving our environmental performance. But these are the numbers. I would like to show what we do in a practical way. We tell them that we are concerned about microplastic pollution and how we work in order to improve this performance. These are the real facts. 100% of the textile of our seats in the train is made by recycled plastic. Our floor is made by several layers, in which there are some layers that are 100% coming from recycled plastic. We are also concerned about our packaging, because we are aware that it's a huge problem, and our wooden packaging was changed. We designed a new approach with some modular systems, since we are aware that the wooden packaging can last about 3-5 years. With the new design and packaging, we have some metal support that for shipping bulk components and system can be used, reused, dismounted, and reused again. And we can do this cycle up as long as we want. This can last up to 25 years, but even at the end of this life, since this packaging is made by metal, we can recycle or reuse as we want. Going to detail into the train, we are also concerned about the depletion of material resource. So we work in order to increase the circularity of our product. So just to provide you a few numbers, around 80% of aluminum are coming from recycled content into our train. Around 60% of glass, the windows of our train are made by recycled content. Around 70% of steel is made by recycled content, but there are also some specific components that are coming from they are completely circular, like the wheel set, in which the supplier is 100% circular because reuse again all the old system melting them. Also, we are involving our supplier, because in order to do this, it's impossible to improve our performance without their support. All the value chain is involved. Our supplier asked to provide us some EAC, Energy Attribute Certificate, in order they provide us the green energy that they are using in their facilities. We ask them to increase the recycled content. We install photovoltaic panel into our facilities to provide green energy, and we also buy green energy. Currently, we are covering 100% of green energy in USA and in Europe. We are around 90% in UK and around 70% in Japan. But we also work with our customer in order to improve their Scope 3 emission reduction. How we do this? This is our roadmap. As Rose refers before, the LCA is the main tool that we are using. We started long ago, but now we have an approach with with eco-design meaningful, providing better performance, because during the design phase we reiterate the LCA, during different LCA up to improving for the final design the performance of our product. Regarding circular economy, we are working in a project with the aim to have the complete circular transition within the fiscal year 2026, and also we are working in order to improve the circularity of our system and components. There is a specific R&D project involving all different line of business of our company in order to change the use of GRP or carbon fiber composite with natural fiber composite. For sure, we need the support of digitalization and AI for doing this, and this supports us also in order to improve the energy efficiency of our train. The maintenance, we can have a better maintenance with the sensoristic system that can provide us a feedback in order to be aware how to manage the maintenance and the substitution of our the spare parts. Closing my presentation, I would like to show the achievement that I'm honored to brought to my company. We are the first the first company in the world, manufacturer company in the world, that has obtained the certification of the APD for a rolling stock. This is a work that I did in 2010. Then we are also the first company in the world that achieved the certification of the environmental product declaration for an high-speed train, and I can assure you that is a very huge, complicated activity, since a train can have up to 1 million part number. So you can understand, since all of you are experts, what does it mean to make an inventory of this kind. We are also the one and only company in the world that has achieved the carbon management certification into the design and engineering department for our vehicle line of business. And with the support of Rose and Marzia, we released, as only company in the world manufacturer, the first social LCA, and currently we are the only company in the world for any kind of product that has in charge the social product declaration certification. This means, maybe she will refer in the next days what does it mean, but it's a very huge result. Now I would like to close my presentation with a short comment that, considering the relevant topics that we showed today, as my personal opinion, but hopefully also as shared feeling, I would like to underline how this event involving industries, university, association, and professionals, shall be the right place to say and declare our position regarding what is happening not so far from us. I would like to thank you very much to support this event. Thank you very much.
Davide, don't forget. I know I take you a lot of time, but you have to be resistant. You have a 10 minutes break, just 10 minutes, and then we have other 3 presentations. And then I promise you will have an Italian aperitif you will not regret. Please, 10 minutes, and then we start again.
Thank you. You can grab water from in the foyer and go around to walk a little bit.